Today on CityCast Chicago, what's next for Chicago's public health and police departments? Promontory Point swimmers want more protections, and Chance's acid rap mixtape celebrates 10 years. Joining me to make sense of another busy week in the city is WTTW's Heather Sharon and Block Club Chicago's Maxwell Evans. It's Friday, August 18th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago is talking about. Max, Heather, welcome back to CityCast.
So glad to be here.
Hello.
Hey, I appreciate y'all. But before we jump into the conversation, I want to source our chatter question. In Hey Chicago, we are asking people, where is their favorite or the best place to cry in the city? And so I wanted to get that question from y'all, two people who spend a lot of time going around Chicago. And it can't be your house, right? It can't be a room in the place that you live. It needs to be a public or private location outside of your domicile. Heather, where's your favorite place to cry in the city?
I mean, it has to be the CTA, right? Because, that's just what the CTA is for, right? And, if you see somebody crying on the CTA, just avert your eyes. Go about your business. Look at your phone. Look out the window. Read a book. You don't need to be all up in their business. Just let them have their moment. The CTA is the best public private space in the city, and that's what it's there for. If you grew up in the city and you did not cry on the CTA at some point in high school about a romantic partner, then I don't even know if you're human. But that's where it is.
Hey, I want you to know you are not alone. We've already had people reach out and say, because their motto on the train is mind your business and avert your eyes, so much is already happening on CTA. Another person crying on the bus and or train is not that out of the norm for people. I don't know if I have it in me. I feel like I would until I came out and onto the platform. But Maxwell, what about you? What's a great place for you to go get a good cry in?
Yeah, so first off, I just want to say the CTA, I am not a native Chicagoan, so I didn't have that experience, and I'm a little intimidated by that. I take the CTA everywhere, but I don't know if I could do it on the bus or the train. I get the rules, I get you avert your eyes, but I'm a little too intimidated by that. So I like to go for the Lakefront Trail when I'm on my bike or something. It can just look like sweat, or it can look like I'm not actually having a breakdown or anything like that. And more specifically, there's this basketball court over by the 35th Street Bridge on the trail. Especially at nighttime, you get back there, it's just your own island back there. So I feel like there's no better spot than I'm just in the darkness. I'm going deeper into my feelings, just start crying on that basketball court.
I know the exact basketball court you are talking about. I ride past it on my bike all the time. I agree. I think the Lakefront Trail, it feels in many ways like just a gimme. That's what it's meant for. Me, I'm gonna stay in your neck of the woods, Maxwell, behind the South Shore Cultural Center. There is that little beach back there that not many people are hip to. And if you find yourself out there on a good day before the cold temperature comes in, I feel like you can probably just get a good cry on what feels like a nice little low-key beach for a little bit, or even walk through the nature sanctuary, get to the back of there, and then you out there truly by yourself. So somewhere in South Shore, I think is a top place to cry.
It's ridiculous because I was going to say that one, but I'm always mentioning the sanctuary. I'm always mentioning South Shore. Let me pick something a little different. So you stole mine. You didn't even know it.
We had a busy week across the city of Chicago, and it started with some news out of City Hall with Brandon Johnson doing a little bit of hiring, doing a little bit of firing. We're going to start with the hiring. Earlier this week, lead producer Samal Ali Say and I broke down Johnson's press conference announcing the new police superintendent, Chief Larry Snelling. Obviously, he still needs to be confirmed by the city council, but we ran through his bio. Born in Inglewood, CPS student, 30 years CPD, led Area 2 in Inglewood, overseeing training in counterterrorism. But Heather, you were in the room during this press conference. Let's start with what were some of your takeaways?
This is going to be, if not the most important appointment Brandon Johnson makes in his time as mayor. It is certainly going to be up there. So now, not only will Larry Snelling face pointed questions from the Community Commission on Public Safety and Accountability and the City Council, I expect him to be confirmed. There's no real sort of, movement to say that he's not qualified because of his record that you just ran through. And he's somebody who does have a lot of support across the political spectrum. You heard from sort of the FOP, the police union that represents rank and file officers, embracing Larry Snelling as one of their own. But you also saw the ACLU of Illinois saying, Larry Snelling is somebody we can work with. We know that, he's committed to sort of doing things the right way. So the question becomes, what happens after that vote? What does Larry Snelling do? And there's not going to be a honeymoon, and the challenges that he will face are just massive. So not only will he face immediate pressure to continue this sort of downward trajectory of murders and shootings and other violent crimes, he's also going to face a good deal of pressure to make significant progress on efforts to reform the Chicago Police Department. And I think that perhaps is even a bigger challenge than reducing crime. And I think that you're going to hear a lot of people sort of linking the fact that unless the police department begins to constitutionally police its Chicago residents, there can be no long-term significant reduction in crime because those two things are linked. So that is really the what Larry Snelling is signing up for. And at the same time, he now works for a mayor, essentially, who has promised to revamp how public safety is approached in Chicago. So he's not going to be somebody who's going to sort of be, arrest, sort of a lot of focus on arrest numbers or, that sort of thing. He's got to sort of take a more holistic approach because that's what Brandon Johnson promised during the campaign. And if he doesn't deliver, that's going to be a political problem for the mayor and the police superintendent.
Throughout this hiring process, it seems that so many people involved wanted someone from inside the department. But I was at an event earlier this week with a bunch of journalists that we all love from across the city, and it felt there was this sentiment that we're sort of romanticizing his 30 years on the force, romanticizing him being sort of a son of Inglewood. But you asked questions at the press conference about, well, you were over one of the most divested neighborhoods in this community that doesn't have the most positive relationship with policing. You were over training, which came under major scrutiny in a federal consent decree, which the Chicago Police Department is slow to make improvements on. Heather, do you feel like your questions got answered during that press conference? And do you think we're maybe glossing over some major criticism points?
No, Chief Snelling did not answer my question, which was specifically if the Department of Justice found in 2017 that the department's training academy was producing officers unprepared to lawfully and constitutionally police Chicago, how can reform advocates be certain that he's committed to improving reform? And he said, look, I'm committed to actual training, robust training that actually gets officers the tools they need to police constitutionally. But his record is at best mixed on this. And I think that we are sort of in this, the sort of a cycle that's been going on in Chicago for decades. A mayor hires an outsider to lead the police department that's been under fire and scandal plagued and beleaguered. And then that outside police chief doesn't really make any difference. So he gets fired. And then an insider is picked. But then he is beset by scandal and he is fired. And then he is replaced by an outsider who is again replaced by an insider, and on and on and
the
on.
merry-go-round continues.
And that's where we are right now. So, once Larry Snelling is confirmed, as I expect him to be, he will replace David Brown, who was brought on as an outsider to replace Eddie Johnson, who was an insider who was brought on to replace Gary McCarthy, an outsider. And I don't know that sort of repeating this cycle ad infinitum is really going to sort of address the deep-rooted and fundamental problems in the Chicago Police Department department. And Brandon Johnson made no little promises on this fact, and he is going to have to deliver. And it's very much an open question as to whether or not he got it right here.
From City Hall over to one of the most relaxing places in the city of Chicago, Promontory Point. It is back in the news again. We're usually talking about fighting to protect the limestones, but we got a landmark now, but a new fight is taking place. What's happening over at the Point, Max?
Yeah, so there's a very well-established tradition, culture, whatever you want to call it, going back decades of people swimming at the point. Like you go to the north side of the point, you'll see a lot of people that are kind of just floating around, doing more leisurely swimming. And then at the south end, you've got people that are going back and forth to the 59th Street Pier. It's about a half mile, so like it's a real good checkpoint. You can get a mile in for a round trip. So yeah, people have been doing this for years, just trying to get their exercise in, enjoy Lake Michigan and all its beauty. And so this summer they are concerned because they're reporting an increase in boats and jet skis coming close to them as they swim. There are a few buoys out in the water that say that you can't, that try and protect the shoreline, try and protect people at 57th Street Beach, for example, from boaters and jet skiers coming too close. But there's a lot of gaps in them right now. And on the north end where the leisurely swimmers are, there's really only one. It's kind of tilted and floating in the water, not very visible. So that's led to a lot of close calls that these swimmers are saying. And they've asked for more buoys and more protections to really acknowledge that, hey, people swim out here. And so that's been going not as well as they would have hoped, I'd say, because they'd asked the Park District for more buoys. And the Park District essentially said, well, you're not supposed to swim at the point anyway. You're supposed to swim at 57th Street Beach or 63rd Street Beach or 41st. And you're not allowed to be swimming where there's no beach, no lifeguard on hand. And so that's kind of caused some concern because for a lot of these swimmers, it's like, well, yeah, but there's still dozens of people out here every day. Like whether or not it's legal, whether or not you're supposed to, the fact of the matter is people have and always have, people do and always have swim at the point.
This reminds me of a story a little bit ago up sort of on the north side of the city where you had swimmers, people sort of jumping into the lake, and they were asking for more life rings. And the city sort of resisted putting them there because they were like, well, this will encourage swimming in places where it's technically banned. But you talk about this tradition that goes back years and years. You know, how do we balance that tradition against the liability that the Park District is trying to assert here? Because in some respects, they got to, sort of protect themselves and liability of having swimmers out there. But we do also want to make sure that these neighborhood staples are sort of respected.
I asked them some specific questions about what are your future plans for enforcement, or do you plan to install more buoys? And I got like a pretty boilerplate response saying you're not allowed to swim there. Here are the places you can swim. And we're working to hire more lifeguards at the places where you can swim. I really appreciate you bringing up the point about the life rings because it has a lot of echoes of that same situation where the Park District was saying, well, yeah, you just can't swim here. Our hands are kind of tied, and eventually really didn't do too much on that issue until the state essentially forced their hand and said Lake Michigan access points need to have these life rings because it's a safety issue. So it's not really clear what's going to happen with this, but that's why neighbors are going to places like Harbor Masters and to the jet ski rentals at 63rd Street Beach and
trying to solve it as a community, trying to figure out can they build some sort of sense of personal accountability amongst the sort of stakeholders in the area if the Park District won't sort of step in.
Exactly. And even accountability for the swimmers themselves, because they've been wearing these fluorescent buoys on their arms or making themselves more visible with bright clothing, things like that, where, all right, if the Park District isn't going to put these buoys in, we need to be safe. We don't want to get hit by a boat or a jet ski while we're swimming underwater. So let's just do what we can to make this safer.
This one is for all the project managers, software developers, and anybody else who might be looking for better ways to build teams and manage work. On September 14th in nearby Madison, Wisconsin, catch Scrum Day. It's a one-day conference all about the Scrum approach and other agile methods of project management. There'll be networking, breakout sessions, and presentations like the empowerment equation for product owners and the art of stopping the start. If any of these titles apply to you, that's executive, product owner, scrum master, or developer, I bet you don't want to miss Scrum Day in Madison next month. Get your tickets now at scrumday.org. Heather, let's get you back in here. We talked about a big hiring in Mayor Johnson's administration. Now we got to switch gears and talk about the firing that may or may not have been a surprise to some this week. Dr. Allison Arwoody, after years of leading Chicago's Department of Public Health, is out, and it seems without many opportunities to state their case in front of the mayor. What are you hearing?
Well, here's the thing. This, even if COVID had never happened, and let's all take a moment and go down that sliding doors moment of what all of our lives could have been like if a global pandemic had not swept the world, upending our lives. Allison Arwoody was barely confirmed by the city council in 2019 because she supported then Mayor Lightfoot's decision to break a campaign promise and not reopen public mental health clinics that were closed back in 2011 by former Mayor Rahm Emanuel. So Allison Arwoody and Lori Lightfoot had long been at loggerheads with the progressive political movement that really fueled Brandon Johnson's victory in the mayoral election. Allison Arwoody campaigned for Lori Lightfoot. She published a column in the Sun-Times. She told me that she considered Lightfoot Chicago's mental health mayor and said that she should be reelected. So I was not at all surprised when Brandon Johnson fired Allison Arwoody. And you can talk about whether he, should have given her a chance to make her case or say goodbye to the city or her staff. All of that, I think, is sort of secondary. But the fact of the matter is that they were truly diametrically opposed on questions of what Chicago's public health agendas and policies should be. And Brandon Johnson said that during the campaign. So this is one of those shocking stories that should not be shocking if you know the backstory. And
which you always do.
Which I always do. That is my brand. That is what I bring. And so now Brandon Johnson really sort of finds himself in an even hotter spotlight of trying to figure out, well, okay, if it's not Allison Arwoody as the commissioner of the Department of Public Health, who is? And that person, along with Larry Snelling, the next top cop, is going to face just a massive to-do list. So he or she will have to help start reopening the public mental health clinics. He or she will have to expand the non-police response to people who call 911 when they are suffering mental health crises. These are all huge, huge tasks made more difficult by the fact that, oh wait, COVID, still here, not gone away, still killing, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 Chicagoans every week. And that, we're about to sort of go into the fall where there's going to be a new formulation of the vaccine. So people are going to have to get another booster.
There's probably no new COVID-19 money coming down the pike anytime soon.
Correct. And at the same time, the city faces a deadline to spend all of that COVID-19 relief money by the end of 2024. And much of the department's budget, the Department of Health's budget, I should say, is really made up of those federal grants. So this is just going to be a massive undertaking and is really at the heart of what Brandon Johnson promised during the campaign, that he was going to sort of take a brand new approach to sort of not just law enforcement, but also to treat Chicago's crime and violence problem as truly a public health problem. He was elected by the people who have sort of been pushing that. And so now, it's time for him to put up or shut up. And I think that perhaps has been more complicated by sort of the way that Arwoody was firing, her decision to sort of publicly object to the way that she was fired, and sort of his reluctance on Monday to sort of directly address questions about why he made that decision and why he handled it in the way that he did.
Man, you really started that answer with imagine a time where there was no COVID-19 and then ended it with sort of a smack of like, well, COVID-19 is still here. A financial cliff is coming up for the public health department. They'll have to start thinking about gun violence as a public health crisis like so many of the rest of us do. Oh, and I didn't even mention environmental justice, which they will also have to have some big strategies for moving forward.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like 4 years ago, people didn't talk about the leader of the public health department in the same ways that they talk about the leader of the police department, right? Are there any front runners at this point? Who's raising their hand saying, I want to do that job?
So, there's nobody who sort of has the public profile that Allison Arwady really sort of created for herself because, it was hard for me to remember, but I went back to the clips. But, she had launched that daily Ask Dr. Arwady online question and answer session even before the lockdown orders came into effect. And, she was not confirmed or picked by Lori Lightfoot because she has expertise in epidemiology. That was, a happy coincidence for Chicago. So, Brandon Johnson is going to have to find somebody who can sort of do sort of what was the job of the public health commissioner in the before times, but also somebody who can handle sort of these new problems and new threats, and somebody who can sort of communicate in a public-facing role. Yeah. So this is a really, really big challenge, one of a number that the mayor is going to confront in earnest after Labor Day.
So much focus has been on how he went about relieving Dr. Allison Arwady of her duties, but is that different than how other mayors have gone about sort of clearing out before they bring in their own picks?
No, it's not. And here is the problem that Brandon Johnson created for himself, was that he is not only promising to govern as the most progressive person ever elected as Chicago mayor, he's also promised to govern as a collaborator, as somebody who convenes people together, takes everybody's sort of position in, and then makes the best decision with the support of those sort of people who are involved. And I think that this
he positioned himself as more likable than the Moore administration in some ways.
Right. So this, in a sense, is sort of a problem that he created for himself, because if you say, as he has, I'm not a dictator, I'm not coming in to make decisions and tell people what to do, and then you fire somebody at 5 o'clock on a Friday without giving them a chance to say goodbye to their staff and sort of be able to be clapped out of the office or what have you, that's a contradiction that we in the news media are going to focus on. Should it obscure the fact that these were real policy decisions and real policy with real implications for the mayor's agenda? I think you have to do both.
Mm-hmm. Max, one of the reasons we love having you on the show is not only because of the beat you cover and how much attention you put into it, but I feel like every time you come, you're talking about some new rallying effort, some new GoFundMe, some new story in the neighborhood you cover where neighbors have shown up to have the back of their neighbors, local business owners, and you got another story coming out of Woodlawn. Can you tell CityCast listeners about it?
Yeah, so there's the 7323 Chicago Cafe. It's in a shipping container at 66 in Woodlawn. They've been operating for about a year now. They just celebrated their year anniversary earlier this month, but that year has been plagued with some real issues. They've been burglarized once, just a couple months after they opened. And that took several months, all the way up until June of this year for them to recover from. They just reopened for that, and then about 5-6 weeks later, they were burglarized again. And so this is a Woodlawn resident, a small business in an area that doesn't have a whole lot of small businesses. Like this is it's in a pocket park, so it's like mostly a residential neighborhood. It's kind of the only cafe attraction right there in that central location. And so, yeah, this is it's a real problem that this business has been trying to get off the ground for about a year now, and so far has had to face some real struggles trying to do that. But luckily, the people in the neighborhood, the people across Chicago have really come together to support Mark Quinn, who owns 7323 Cafe, and in the last 24 hours, actually, have almost helped him reach his goal of $3,500 to recover from the most recent burglary. So it really felt so good to see that. In chatting with Mark Quinn earlier this week, I know he was sounding really down. He was sounding even a little reluctant to like come to neighbors again and be like, hey, I know I just asked you for $3,000, but I need to ask you for $3,000 again. And so to kind of hear the frustration, the pain in his voice, and then to know within 24 hours, within 48 hours of our conversation, there's about $2,000 more to shore up the business, to hopefully get him back up and running. It's just a really wonderful thing that people have been pulling together for this business and for him.
Yeah, Mark Wynn actually stopped by my house a couple of weeks ago. We have some mutual friends. He's come and supported some of my events. I've been able to pull up on the cafe, and it's always, a celebratory moment when the homies open something in their neighborhood, when they bring their passion to the community. And it's great to focus on those positive stories. And it sucks when moments like this, these hiccups, these setbacks happen. And not every business owner can manage a couple of these, right? And so I appreciate you drawing attention always to these neighborhood efforts. My hope is that Mark Wynn at 7323 can, bounce back from this and, leave them alone, y'all. Come on,
for
man.
Real. Like,
Let
what are
them
you
chill
getting
in the
from
hood,
that?
G. Right. Stop, chill out. I'm sure the people who did it is not listening to CityCast right now. But, maybe they are. Maybe they are. And come on, we're disappointed in you. We're disappointed. But we got to end this episode of CityCast like we end every episode of CityCast Chicago. Y'all already moving y'all head. See, that's why I love y'all. Y'all gas me up when I need it, right? I haven't even hit a note yet, and y'all already jamming because y'all know what's coming up, and that's some good news. Come on, some good news. Might have to start going down there. We want to give you an event, some good news, something to get you through the next hour, the next day, through your weekend. Heather, I'm going to start with you. What's your good news?
That the First Amendment's protections for the freedom of the press remain intact after some cops in Marion, Kansas raided the Marion Record and seized their computers and their cell phones and put them at risk of not being able to publish. And not only were they able to publish, but that the Kansas Bureau of Investigation got involved and said that the warrant that they used to seize the newsroom's devices and computers was improper, but also that, it was able to publish and that it didn't miss a beat. And I think that a lot of journalists watch what happened in Kansas this week with sort of our hearts in our mouths and a really bad feeling in our stomach, just knowing that, journalism and freedom of the press has been so under attack for the last several years. And I think it was especially important because there's an Illinois connection. The owner of the Marion Record, Eric Meyer, is a former University of Illinois professor of journalism who taught many, many Chicago journalists.
Eric Meyer also taught our wonderful newsletter editor, Sydney Madden.
There we go.
During her time.
And let's take a moment to sort of express our condolences to Eric Meyer on the death of his mother, who was really traumatized by the raids. She was 98 and ended up dying shortly after it. And he says he believes that stress contributed to her death. And all of us have been thinking about him and sending good thoughts his way.
Yeah. Wow. Joan Meyer, Eric's mother, was also the co-owner of the paper. Max, I want to bring you in here. We've talked a little bit over the last few weeks about Chicago's hip hop scene. We're celebrating 50 years of hip hop. And this week, one of Chicago's, in my opinion, greatest mixtapes is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so the 10th anniversary of Chance the Rapper's Acid Rap is going to be at the United Center on Saturday. I will be in there for sure because Acid Rap is so formative to my music taste. I was a junior in high school when that came out in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So this is like right as Chicago is bubbling up on the national scene in terms of rap, in terms of hip hop. And Chance the Rapper, like when I first heard him, I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. This guy's going to be something serious. And I actually had an opportunity to go see him for $5 in 2013. All my friends were going and I just couldn't get a ride out there because I was like 16 or whatever, couldn't drive. And so, Yeah, I did not pay $5 to go to the United Center for this anniversary concert. I can tell you that much. Kind of a missed opportunity there. But yeah, from the production to his raps, what he was rapping about.
What's your joint? What's your joint?
That's really hard. I'd say probably Acid Rain because I feel like that was really him putting himself out there. And when it comes to music, I really love when an artist is like, this is who I am. This is my experience. And yeah, kind of dealing with the more difficult sides of things, like not being afraid to put yourself out there, out on wax too. It's just like that's probably my favorite, and I can't wait to hear all these songs drop on Saturday.
I love Everybody Something featuring Saba and BJ, the Chicago Kid, which that song makes me think of who are going to be some of these features, because Saba is opening up for Chance. But I mean, when he come to Chicago, we saw the commercial sort of leading up to the show this weekend. King Louis was in there. Is he going to stop by? Even though Dirk wasn't in there, people going to be mad on Twitter if I don't mention Dirk. I mean, if he pulls up at the United Center a week after being there again, I think that would be a moment. And, you know, the United Center going to be busting this weekend. During the day, Bulls Fest is going to be there. At night, you're going to be able to see the 10th anniversary of Acid Rap, which, little known fact, came out April 30th, 2013, which was my 22nd birthday. So it was a hell of a birthday present for me when that mixtape officially dropped. So we've already got some great events for this weekend. And so I'm going to finish us out with some good news. I got 2 events for you this weekend. The first one is the Middle Eastern Immigrant and Refugee Alliance Fest over at Warren Park in West Ridge. They're going to have games, activities, but also be celebrating newly arriving immigrants and refugees to Chicago. And also you can head over to North Lawndale this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. to celebrate National Honeybee Day. They're going to be out there doing scavenger hunts, have activities for kids, but you can also help build some bee boxes to help protect these crucial local pollinators. I want to give a huge thank you to our guest today from Block Club Chicago, Maxwell Evans, and from WTTW, our encyclopedia, Heather Sharon. Thank y'all for making time for CityCast.
Thank you very much. So glad to be on.
Thanks for having me.
Before I let you go, I want to give a huge thank you to the people who make CityCast Chicago possible and our newsletter, Hey Chicago. That's lead producer Simone Alisea, our newsletter editor Sydney Madden, our producer is Grant Irving, our roving newsletter editor this week is Natalia Aldana. The music y'all all love listening to is from Sam Thousand, All the Kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. If you love the podcast and newsletter as much as I do, please share it with your friends and family and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. Also, the best way to show us some love is to respond to our chatter questions. This week, we want to know what's your favorite or the best place to cry in the city of Chicago. Let us know with a text or voicemail at 773-780-0246. I'm back here on Monday talking about the first day of school, specifically for newly arriving migrant students. Join us then, and please, please, have a good weekend. Peace. Welcome back to City Cash Chicago, Chicago's #1 daily news game show, where they talk headlines and we give prizes. Our guests today, Heather Sharon and Maxwell Evans.
Have you busted that out in a real recording, or?
Yeah.
No,
a new revenue stream just dropped. Get on it.
I feel like all my aunties call it City Cash, and so I just been telling them I don't even host a podcast. I host a news game show.
Gotcha.
City Cash. Okay.
City Cash Chicago.